Hey everyone, this is John with the Reluctant Tech Traveler, and I'm here with the great Allan Curtis. Allan and I have known each other for quite a long time. When I initially started out of college, I worked at a company called Systems and Computer Technologies, SCT, that basically kind of threw you out to various clients to fix whatever they wanted. And Allan Curtis was the person that sent me on these suicide missions. And it was actually a great experience. Allan recently retired, and he was nice enough to take the time to basically have a chat with me. Allan, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, John. It's great to see you. It's been far too long.
Thanks. And how is retirement treating you? I mean, you recently
Well,
retired.
it's something I'm still adjusting to, but it's going quite well. I've got a couple of grandkids now, so I'm a longtime grandfather now, so that's something I'm getting used to as well. But it's going very well. It is very different than the nose to the grindstone that we've been doing for so many years. I'm having a great time, enjoying it, and certainly no shortage of things to fill up the day.
That's good to hear. What's your typical schedule now? I mean, you don't have to get up at the crazy hours like you used to. I mean, do you have a set schedule or is it just kind of still in vacation mode at this point?
And I'm still in rather vacation mode. It's only been about 6 or 7 months now, and I'm coming up. Going to be starting here fairly soon to do some volunteer work with a couple of local medical facilities and hospitals, just to to help out a little bit there because I've got time. And within my family, I actually am surrounded by medical or medically associated staff between my various daughters and friends and so forth and so on. They've inspired me to try to help out and give a little back to the community. So I'll be starting that. So I'll be going back onto a little bit more regimented schedule. But other than that, I'm just loving life these days.
That's cool. So, Alan, one of the things I did want to ask you is that although we had a pretty close relationship for a while, especially when we were overseas, I don't know that much about you. So, I mean, can I ask, were you originally from the company we worked with was originally based in sort of the Philly area. Was that where you're originally from? Where did you grow up?
No, I'm originally from South Carolina, upstate South Carolina.
Okay.
And I've lived a number of places around the country. Some of it before SCT, the company where you and I worked, so many years ago. But some of it with the company as I was moving around, taking over certain large scale agreements as a site director, as a CIO, and so forth on certain of our larger or more complex situations. So bounced around a good many parts of the country, but no, I'm an old Southern boy here, but I found myself north of the Mason-Dixon at least a little bit
In Yankee
for
territory, right?
the most part of the last 30 years.
So, okay. So I guess this is the interesting thing. How did you end up at SCT? For me, Skip sort of sent me this great pitch saying the manager that I worked with, this guy named Skip Jones, was a really good guy, but he sort of said, "Oh, we have this dream job. You can travel around and we'll send you the crazy places." How did you how did you end up at SCT then? Did you get recruited or did you just find an opportunity?
Well, it really has found an opportunity. At the time, I was actually the lead program analyst and DBA for one of the major counties here in Pennsylvania. My background is purely technical. If you remember that, I spent a lot of years, writing compilers, writing OSs, doing a lot of application work and so forth. And I ended up as the lead, analyst and designer for Montgomery County here in Pennsylvania. And
Oh, okay.
after doing a stint there for a certain number of years, looking to get out and working through a headhunter, I ended up with the opportunity at SCT to be able to come in as actually a ringer in the courts area because there with Montgomery County, I designed a number of systems for a lot of their courts tracking and case tracking systems and so forth. And at the time, SCT had literally, I mean, within a week, had signed a major contract in Pennsylvania for significant courts tracking systems, and they needed somebody that could work as the intermediary, as the analyst between the technologists and that very unique area of courts and law enforcement area. So I just happened to have the right credentials at the right time and joined in and as I know you experienced in your tenure with SCT, I worked for the company for 2 days, thinking I was going to be here in Pennsylvania for a while, and ended up being sent out to Phoenix, Arizona for several weeks to go take over a situation out there with their courts and jail systems out there. So I did the immediate turnaround, just like you did.
Yeah.
Jumped on a plane.
So, I mean, it was a great experience for me, but I mean, it was kind of the Wild West. I mean, you
It
basically,
was.
when did you realize, okay, I mean, as much as I love work that experience, especially those 4 years, I mean, it was kind of just insanity. Like they basically threw you out there and expect you to figure things out. When did you realize, okay, this is kind of crazy? Did you realize that in the
Well, I
first?
think I realized that pretty early on, but frankly, that's something that I thoroughly enjoyed. It really, call it masochistic if you will, but it was a lot of fun, and I had the great pleasure of being surrounded by so many very talented individuals like yourself and Skip Jones, who you mentioned earlier, and so forth, over the years. Um, and as you and I, traveled out to Australia, and I was as I had been after I had been with SCT for a certain number of years, and the opportunities that presented themselves to me, I ended up starting along with some other individuals that I won't drop too many names, but some folks that I know that you know. We ended up starting our international sector,
Right.
and between with myself and another individual or two, and so we just, I think we just sort of created our own hell there for a while, and starting this whole new division or group within the company. And they basically said, if you can make it work, go for it, and gave us the latitude to do it. And again, that's where it really was kind of the Wild West for all of us. With you, myself, and others, we were just out there paving our own way. There was a very, very hardworking sales guy that was also assigned internationally, and I give him credit. He's probably one of the few that did more miles than I did out there circling the globe, opening up those opportunities. He'd get the ink dry on the contract, and I'd get an email say, "Hey, Alan, we signed something in Timbuktu. Go figure out what it is and go make them happy, whatever it is, and do the best you can." And
Yes.
so that's where you and I, or I'd go out and make the original trips, get to know the client, the situation, and then grab somebody that didn't duck fast enough, like yourself, and off we go on the road.
Yeah, let's not mention names. I do know the sales guy, although he did some pretty heavy sales. So I mean,
Yes, he did. That's
um
a whole different set of stories there.
yeah, I mean, and as far as the travel goes, I mean, you traveled more than I did, Alan. I mean, I have to ask you, I mean, that was okay for you? Like, no, I mean, definitely I was in several relationships that kind of had issues. I won't mention, but I mean, the girls just weren't happy that I was gone like 20 days a month. But I mean, like personally and professionally, like the travel was okay for you? Like it never got to be like unbearable?
It can be very difficult. There were many situations where I would be gone for solidly weeks at a time. It could be 2.5, sometimes 3 weeks, where I might be circling the globe because
Right.
as our business continued to expand in the international sector, I there would be situations where I was literally circling the globe, just bouncing country to country to country, trying to make it as efficient as possible and minimize my time away. But it just got to be a sheer volume thing after a while. And fortunately, my wife was very, very capable of dealing with things herself and taking care of everything. And the thing that we used to joke about quite a bit, because of my history with the company and the things and large scale agreements and statewide agreements and everything else that I had been managing. You may recall that I spent a number of years having responsibility for everything outside the U.S. and the state of West Virginia. And it
Yes,
fit right in there.
I don't know how you, yes, for, I mean, Alan was involved with all overseas clients for our company. That was very actually quick. But then he also had West Virginia, which had made no sense. I'm not sure. I don't know how you got stuck with that, but I mean, it was kind of
Well, it came about. I had been managing a statewide agreement in several different situations that we had. With, like, for example, SUNY, the statewide agreement in the state of New York, and some other states. And I ended up taking over the statewide agreement in West Virginia, and frankly, just established a good rapport with them. I liked them; they liked me when we started expanding our international work and those sectors there. Um,
they wanted to stay with you.
they just wanted to maintain the contact and communication with me. So, and this is, they were good people, and just certainly enjoyed it. That's why we just kept that relationship going. It turned out to be quite successful for all of us, at least while I did, maintain that tenure. Did have to give that up over time, but it was kind of the company joke for quite some time.
I see. So, Alan, I mean, you recently retired. I left SCT probably in the mid 2000s because I went over to San Francisco to work at a couple of dot coms. You've been doing the international things ever since, like, did you give it up at some point or were you still
Actually,
doing
yeah, I actually ended up passing on the international responsibility to others in about, thereabouts 2000.
okay,
I had been with the company. Actually, when I retired, I actually had 40 years with the company, which is, of course, in the tech sector, unheard of.
an
But
eternity?
just thinking about the growth of the company and the various merger and acquisition activities that had gone on over time. I mean, SCT literally was six or seven different companies over time. So I can safely say that I worked for six or seven different places. I just never had to interview between them. But no, I did move in between different roles, but I handed over the international sector partially due to growth. That frankly just got beyond what
One
I could
person.
manage myself as a singular entity. And I had anywhere from 18 to 20 senior individuals reporting directly to me as well. So it just frankly just got to be too much. And I was living away from home way too much. And I had very young daughters at that point.
Ah,
So so going back to your earlier question about about the spousal support and everything else, I was just getting exhausted. I was literally working 24/7 and enjoying the heck out of it, but it was just a matter of just became too much. So we ended up partnering with some companies over in England and also in India at that point.
right.
So we finally were able to establish some basis of operations and then hand that responsibility, for what we were doing in Europe and in England and in Norway and the Middle East and so forth, over to other groups. And we split off and actually had some offices open in Australia to help with a lot of the work that we were doing in Australia and Fiji and Hong Kong, and New Zealand and so forth. So it really just became a matter of growth. But at that time, just thinking about the spousal situation, I had been out there traveling so much that when I did take a different role within the company, and basically at that time I switched over and started a lot of our services development activities. We were developing new services, new types of things that we could provide to all of our clients. Excuse me. Um, my wife made it very clear when she, understood that I'm going to be sleeping in my own bed, much more of the time. And she made it very clear to me, I've got my own way of doing things around here. I do not need you coming home and trying to screw around with any of that or change any of that. She trained me well. Yes, dear, no need for me to change that. So I learned my place very quickly.
Hey,
And it's
happy
been a
life, Alan.
successful formula ever since. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I do remember. Okay, so it was the same situation. I think at some point I basically had enough, and I mean, I did miss it, but the travel got too much, and that was part of the reason I took the job in
Tough.
San
It's
Francisco.
tough. It's very difficult to be a road warrior, and especially without a very strong support structure behind you. I was just very fortunate in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, do you so like do you miss it once in a while, like going overseas? I mean, I remember for me, it was just we mentioned it was just kind of it was just insane. Like literally, I would get a call from you, "Hey, John, we need you over in the Middle East," and I'm like, "Okay, what am
Yeah.
I doing? I have no idea. We'll figure it out when I get there." And so, I did kind of like that sort of living, not sort of not knowing what the next day would be. It was kind of exciting, but I mean, it got to be too much, like you said. I mean, do you ever miss that?
Sometimes, the thing that I go back to so often is in working with all of these different, working in all these so many different parts of the world and so forth, that the people that I work with just really everywhere were really just wonderful people to work with. I mean, just really phenomenal individuals. Um, the travel was tough. I mean, as I know you well know, sometimes you'd spend 30 hours getting there.
Yeah,
At least within my experience, once being there was fantastic. Getting there might be very, very difficult, very tiring, and very trying, but certainly something that that I learned in all of my travels is that the weather may be a little bit different, the accents are certainly different, but people are the same pretty much everywhere. Really, just very delightful people, and as I would assume that you learned as I did. You get outside of this is my opinion here. You get outside of North America. I found that the relationships with me, for example, coming in for business purposes were actually very, very different. It was really very much not so much a business relationship as it was much more of a personal relationship where where the individuals trusted not so much the company, but they trusted you. They wanted to see your eyes. They wanted to be able to build that confidence and have that relationship directly with you. And I found that very flattering and very comforting to be able to develop something beyond just the normal
business.
business acquaintance and relationships and so forth. And in fact, I still keep in touch with a number of those individuals. And as I say, I handed off those reins 25 years ago. And I'm still in touch with certain individuals in Australia and the Middle East and so forth that and even in Norway, where we do stay in touch a bit and just maintain that because we hit it off and became good friends. So
Yeah,
certainly enjoyed those relationships.
it was interesting you mentioned that like in the UK they really sort of like take importance on the idea of sort of drinking and eating together. I remember when I went there once, we won't mention the school, but like I went there and they said, "Okay, we're gonna go to the pub tonight." And I just said, "Well, I don't really drink." And they were kind of just shocked. They were kind of like, "What?" It was kind of like they were mortally offended. And so
Well,
eventually I went and I had to drink a lot and it was fine. But I mean, they really for lack of a better, they really take importance on getting trash together, which I don't quite understand. But I mean, you have to basically drink with certain clients in order, like you said, for them to trust you. And I feel for you, Alan, because I imagine they sort of put you through that occasionally as well, where you had to go through.
oh, well, especially in Australia, one thing that I learned right from my first trip in Australia is one, absolutely, you never want to get into a drinking contest with an Australian. And secondly, they love practical jokes.
Really?
And, you're expected to suffer through it and you're expected to give it back to them. And they love it. It's really a very unique, different um, I don't want to say culture, but certainly a different, perspective than and so many of the folks here in the U.S. But there are a few stories I could share there. But indeed, it's very much a social thing. It's a social expectation, as you
Yeah.
say.
And I mean,
And I mean, and one of these days, you and I will have a chance to chat and try to fully understand how you and I managed to get thrown out of an outdoor bar in Australia. I've never been completely clear on that, but we found a way.
yes, that situation was quite interesting. We were at a bar and then it was an outdoor non-smoking bar. And apparently when I think you lit up a cigarette, they actually threw us out of it.
Whatever it was. Yeah, we were not so politely asked to leave.
It really amazed me, but that is one of the highlights of my memories. I mean, that and
Well, you and I both had a good time there, and we actually happened to be in the city of Canberra, which, I guess, for much of the audience, is kind of the equivalent of Washington, D.C., in
Right.
being the capital city of Australia, which is a beautiful city. It really is a delightful place, and we were working with a great client there, just a very enjoyable place to be. So, my recollections were always very positive there, so I certainly enjoy it. But to your question, yeah. I do miss being there. I do miss the different experiences. That's something that I just thoroughly enjoyed myself. I don't want to go back to the travel, especially these days, because of course, as you well know, the travel situation has changed rather dramatically. We're all
Yes.
still traveling a little bit. In fact, in a couple of days, I'm heading out from the East Coast, where I currently am. Be heading out to San Diego to help to support with the delivery just less than a week ago of my second grandchild, a
Oh,
brand new
wow.
grandson. So,
Congratulations.
oh well, thank you. So, but it's not as the travel is not as fun as it used to be. But or maybe we're just hardened to it by this point.
Yeah, I mean, I when I look back, there were some insane times. You sent me to Australia once, and then I sat next to a couple that argued the whole time. That was actually one of the, at the time I thought it was a living hell, but now I think that's a pretty cool memory. But they ended up basically, they had some marital issues and they basically argued for 20 hours on the plane. I'm like, oh my
Oh
God.
my gosh.
So,
Yeah.
but so do you have a favorite, Alan? I don't want you to upset your clients, but out of all the places you've been to, do you have like a couple of favorite locations that you always,
Well, actually, my favorite location, frankly, is Australia. I
really?
did have the pleasure of being able to work in a large number of countries. I have some very fond memories of doing some work, a lot of work in the United Arab Emirates there in the Middle East, with some delightful individuals. One particular group that I unfortunately never had a chance to go to their home country was into to be able to go into a couple of different places in Lebanon. We had
Oh, like
several
in Beirut,
clients
right?
there, and just because of the situation at the time, we could not visit there. We couldn't go there. So we ended up, they would actually bring a team of people here to Pennsylvania and we would work with them for 2 weeks. They would take everything back with them and apply it themselves. And I so often wanted to be able to visit there just because the people that we're working with were just so phenomenal. But you know, such delightful memories in so many places. But overall, I think Australia was my favorite just due to the wide variety and fun-loving people that I encountered there.
Hmm. Interesting. I did like Australia too, although I have to admit the travel was a little bit too much for me getting down
It's
there.
tough. It is very tough. But hey, you're now about as far away from here as you can get. So you've had a few more of those long haul trips into Japan.
Yeah, I'm in Japan right now, but I'm living in Hawaii. So
Oh,
we
okay.
haven't talked since like too much, except, we sort of chat on Facebook, but after COVID, just it was most of the clients that I worked with, some SAT clients, they never wanted me to go on site anymore. So I thought, you know what, if can work remotely all the time, I'm just going to move to someplace nice. So I moved to Hawaii, but
Right.
I still have some clients in Japan, so that's why it became easier. And I have relatives in Taiwan, so it just
Ah,
became a lot
perfect. And
easier.
that works out well for you.
Right.
That's great. Yeah. So no, it's really been an interesting evolution, as you say. I mean, obviously, you've been away from what you know as SCT for a number of years now. The company, is very, very, very different now than it was then. It continued to evolve tremendously. The technical footprint is much, much, much larger and more complex than it was back when you were, an active part of that. I'm sure that you would have, continued to emerge as the master of that technology footprint.
I don't know about that.
But it has evolved quite a bit in terms of both the approach and the style. Back when you and I were working together, and as we started up, the international work, um, in those days, of course, it was very much very individualized. Each of our client situations was very unique, and we would work very, very, very hard to be able to take our tools, the very flexible and powerful tools that we had, coupled with the skills that you and the other consultants would bring to the table to help to conform, our tools to help to support their environment and those things that they consider to be their competitive differentiators and so forth and so on. Well, that's all well and good, but the problem with that individualized approach, it's not repeatable. It's not a volume business. So over time, and there was a lot of the vestiges of this back when you were working with it, but you were very familiar with the way that we were trying to standardize those implementations and standardize that technology.
Yeah, the
But
cookie
of
cutter.
course, as it's
Right.
gone, over time, I mean, excuse me, continued refinements and maturing and everything else, we really got to the point to be able to replicate that environment more and more and more. And I'm sure you're very aware that the entire emphasis these days is moving everything into a SaaS environment. So that's a very much replicable environment. But a lot of the rules are changed now, and a lot of the rules of implementation, the techniques, and everything else. But the I guess the gist of it is that the evolution of what you had seen to where things are within Ellucian today, with an SCT now called Ellucian after many changes of name along the way,
Not forget
is
SunGuard.
that much more of a higher volume, higher quality, much more as streamlined as possible in implementation while trying to minimize the impact of the maintenance of the technology as possible. So it's
Yeah.
been a very interesting evolution. So a lot of big steps and certainly a lot of small ones along the way. It's been really an interesting ride, and I'm certainly enjoying watching it from a distance these days.
So I mean, so I have to ask Alan if you could do it all. If I mentioned, I actually usually ask this for all my friends, but I mean, if you could do it all over again, knowing what 2025's Alan Curtis knows, if you could talk to 20-year-old Alan, would you tell him run for the hills, or would you do anything different, or would you do everything the same?
Well, I would hopefully not lean into as many left hooks as I did over the years, but no, I think I'd tell him to keep going.
Really?
The I'm very pleased with what we did. I'm very pleased to have worked with so many delightful individuals over the years, and pleased with the environments that we had into place. Not that it's ever been easy. Um, Not that there haven't been some significant bumps along the way, and certainly some hair pulling, but we accomplished so much, and hopefully helped to bring a little bit of success out to a lot of people. And certainly I made a lot of friends along the way. And hey, I've got friends out there in Japan, so
Yeah,
it's been a good ride, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's not over yet, but again, now I get a chance to sit back and relax.
that sounds awesome. And then I guess you mentioned your favorite place was in Australia. When you look back, do you have any particularly like what are your best stories? Like you mentioned the story when we got thrown out of Australia, an outdoor restaurant. Any particularly like when you look back at this career, like any awesome stories that you would be willing to share?
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm going to go back to the topic that we touched on earlier about the social drinking aspect, and relate it to my first visit to Australia, which back in, gosh, mid 90s, 93, 94, something like that. Um, I had particular difficulties going to a school that's about 500 miles north of Sydney, Australia, and it took me literally over 30 hours to get there because of a series of different
Connections.
flight difficulties and so forth. And of course, I'm rather excited going to Australia for the first time. So, you know, flew out to LA, which is about 6 hour flight from here, and then jumped the 14 and a half hour nonstop to Sydney. Messed around Sydney for a little bit, then caught the crop dusters up to this smaller town where this major university was. And now this airport was such that was really just a series of glorified carports, shall we say. The pilot is the same one that loaded and unloaded the luggage and everything else. And we're
The
talking
express airport,
very
yes.
small plane, indeed, indeed. And so I get in there, and I'm just completely brain damaged at this point because I've been traveling so long. My time zone is completely flustered. I'm on the other side of the globe, other side of the other hemisphere. I'm mentally fried at this point, and I have no idea who I'm meeting. Never met anybody, never spoken to anybody there. So I go, I'm walking around this very, very, very small airport, and two gentlemen in shorts and bush hats come walking up to me, introduce themselves. Hey, you must be Allan. I think I am. Let's go. You must be
You think
those
you
that I'm
are?
looking for. This was actually several officials from the university. I was getting in there on a Sunday afternoon, and it's great. Welcome to Australia, and since you've not been here before, then we have to introduce you to certain of Australia's traditions for first-time visitors and such.
Oh God,
Well,
I'm
I'm
so
okay,
sorry.
great, whatever that is. I didn't know if I, was going to have to ride a kangaroo or what. I had no idea what was going on. Well, so they took me to a local restaurant and insisted, that it was tradition now that I had to down two 20-ounce Tooheys Reds, which are very powerful beers. These are about
Yes.
11% beers and a couple of 20 ounces. And of course, the problem with Tooheys Red is that it's smooth. It's too smooth. It goes down all too well. So as I said, I'm just mentally fried at this point anyway. But I'm trying to carry on a legitimate conversation. So we could have a couple of these things, a couple of these beers, and then we go grab some dinner somewhere. I'll have an excellent late lunch, early dinner, whatever it was. During which they insisted that I sample any number of fine Australian wines, of which apparently there are a number.
Alan, you're
And
mixing drinks? Oh my
oh
God.
yeah, oh yeah. And of course, after dinner and some delightful conversation, I hope it was anyway, they insisted that there be at least one more Tooheys Red just as a palate cleanser. So,
I'm so
okay,
sorry
fine.
to
I'm
hear
nearly
that.
on my knees by this point. And so we said our goodbyes, and they said, "Oh, by the way, we almost forgot," and handed me the keys to a university car and said, "Remember, you drive on the other side of the road here, and your hotel is that way." And that was literally the directions that I had. So, and believe me, driving on the wrong side of the road at that point felt very natural. And I did ultimately find my way to this what you and I would think of as a motel. It was actually a hotel there. But as just as I was leaving that restaurant from talking with my friends there, these two university officials, they said, "Oh, by the way, we just thought we'd better tell you while you were flying over, we bought some additional products from SCT, and you're emceeing a demo at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning on this." So that was my opening introduction to Australia. Somehow made it through, made it there, but I can still to these days, picture those two fine individuals in shorts and their bush hats and sitting in there trying to choke down Tooheys Red and trying to be civil and not fall over. But
How did the demos go the next day? Did you manage to get up on time?
I got up on time. I will share a side story because I think you may have stayed at this same place. The owners of this place, of this very small hotel motel, they actually came knocking on my door at about 7 o'clock in the morning to make sure that I was awake. because again, this is a family operation. Everyone knows each other.
Mhm.
They were very helpful. So I actually was up at that point, just still kind of being excited about the whole thing. Walked out into a bright sunlit morning. Um, Reached down to pet a small dog that was wandering around. Didn't think a whole lot of it. I'm still rather shell shocked at this point. Glanced down, realized I wasn't petting a small dog. I was petting a small deer. The name of this motel is the Deer Park Inn. They actually raised miniature deer for the university. So these little miniature deer look like about fox size or small dog size were walking around all over the place. And I just gave up at that point. Went
You
over
must have
to the
like, what
university.
the
The
hell?
demos went well. I did my opening comments for the demo and got the heck out of the way. So then let the experts take over. So yeah,
It
it
worked
just
out.
it worked out. It worked out. Not sure that I could ever repeat that situation. Not sure I would survive it, but got through at that time, and that's all that counts.
Yeah, it's interesting because they don't have that culture in the US as much anymore, but I've noticed in Japan and Australia and the UK, like they still put a big emphasis on being able to get trashed and like drinking. Like it was, had you not drank, I'm not sure you would have had such a as good of a relationship with those people as you did.
I totally agree. Those individuals that had met me at the airport, literally over the following years, we stayed in touch. We stayed in touch as friends for many years after that. Unfortunately, both of them have since passed away,
Oh, I'm
but
sorry.
we remain really close friends. Some delightful, very worldly individuals that had been very involved with things all over the world for many years before they had settled into that small town in Australia. So very unique individuals.
Yes.
So we had a great time, great experiences, and hopefully accomplished a few good things. So
Awesome memories. That sounds really cool.
yeah, just some great stuff. As I say, just some really phenomenal and unusual folks, unusual personalities everywhere that we go to. Now, remember, and I know you experienced this as well. You know, our experiences traveling all over the world, it was rather unique in that we're working with, for the most part, extremely well educated, in many cases, royalty university officials all over the place. It's a unique, very well educated, generally, more worldly, shall we say, set of individuals, kind of a unique set of folks that we're working with as well, which really, perhaps is not going to be the same experiences that everyone had, but certainly was beneficial, to me, to you, to others. We were able to focus in on trying to accomplish a lot of good things. So it
Yeah.
was certainly made all those difficulties of travel, shall we say, a little more tolerable, a lot more worthwhile, just knowing that we're working with and dealing with good folks out there.
Yeah.
It is kind of a treat to be, get a chance to chat with you, John. As we go back a lot of years, but it's been quite some time, and rather interesting to go back and reminisce about a lot of these things that really haven't even considered, and certainly not too many of the opportunities just with the passage of time to be able to, commiserate with someone that was part of so many of those things, with me.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I'm sure it's usually the same with most of the consultants. Like when I talk to the other road warriors of our generation, of our class, quote unquote, I mean, I don't really remember the work so much, but I remember the after work, like sort of meeting the people and sort of the places. So that to me is usually the stuff that I remember. The work itself, I don't usually remember that much, but I mean, like after work, especially when we're all in a group, like when we were in the UK together, or especially when like you were nice enough to send a group of us to Australia. I mean, the after hours was pretty awesome. So I mean, I
yeah,
definitely
it
know
was.
that so that there was one time I'll share with you a story. You sent me to the UK once, and then I ended up getting trashed with these gentlemen. They were very fine gentlemen, but unfortunately, they forgot their wallets, and so none of us could pay. And so we ended up the bar and the restaurant people were not so happy. So I ended up having to leave my passport and my watch as
Oh, wow.
collateral to go back to the office or to go back to the hotel to get money. So that was it's an awesome experience, and I think back at it, it's really a good memory. But at the time, I was like, "What the hell is going on?" And so, I mean,
Yeah. Well, those are the types of experiences and things that that you always encounter out there, and you just learn how to deal with it and work your way through, and find that that those situations are the same wherever. It's not the end of the world. I mean, I share another story that one of my first trips into the Middle East, going into the United Arab Emirates. I ended up getting stranded in Bahrain, and found myself at about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, where I promise you I was the only one in the Bahrain airport that spoke English and didn't have a machine gun. So, and of course, English is hardly, prevalent there. So, trying to find a flight or trying to explain, I'm trying to get into Al Ain, when they're in the United Arab Emirates. At 2:33 in the morning, um, while trying to clear paperwork, and make sure that I'm not running afoul of some local custom. You figure it out. You just work it out, figure it out. I found individuals to help me, and through sign language, hieroglyphics, whatever it takes. But you work it out just as you did.
you actually sent me to online also. You have your own driver? That was the first time in my life I had a
Yes,
chauffeur pick me up every day.
yes, yes. Yes, and what you may not have realized in having that driver, that was that driver's life's appointed role, is to be there for you. I mean, he could not, he or she, I'm sure was a guy,
Yeah.
he could not leave. He would have spent the rest of the week there waiting for you, because I mean, he could not leave. And in fact, so many of the individuals that we dealt with there, I think you and I did not really realize it at the time because we didn't know so many of the individuals. But the vast majority of those people that we were working with were actually royalty,
Mm.
part of the royal family, or first cousin twice removed, or whatever the case may be. Come to find out that so many that we were dealing with there were royalty, and that's part of the reason why we had such great treatment, had special drivers, had situations where um, um, first class was cleared out for one of us coming in. Even though we weren't generally flying first class, it was just a plane might be secured just for us.
Right.
That we didn't realize, and that you know uh, university wings would be shut down because someone wished it to be. We were not used to that kind of treatment.
No, and I'll share a story with you. The individual, the guy that you and I both dealt with at Allan was a really nice guy, but I remember meeting him, and every time I met him, he would ask me, "Is your hotel okay? Is your hotel?" He would literally
Hmm.
ask that every. And at one point, I just said, "Well, last night was a little noisy," and then he was like, "What?" And then he immediately got, I'm like, and I realized that he was literally gonna fire someone over that comment. I'm
Yes,
like, no, no,
yes,
no, no, it's okay, it's okay. So it was,
absolutely, yes, yeah. Well, I recall that particular hotel, and I wonder if you had the same experiences there, because you were there 3 or 4 or 5 days, or a week or
yeah,
two
yeah,
weeks,
yeah.
whatever that might have been, where the owner or manager there, it was his lot in life to make sure, if you recall this, for you to sit with different individuals every day so that you would meet different people staying at the hotel every day.
They think too much, but yes, I
Yeah.
think.
Just doing everything they could to be as gracious as possible. Indeed, it was really such a unique experience. And that individual that you and I both know, that we were both thinking of, he was royalty. He
He
was
was. Okay.
he definitely was. He definitely was. Yeah.
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 So, but yeah, that was a really good experience. But I mean, I was shocked at how outraged he was that I made a small comment saying it was noisy. It was literally like I mortally offended him, and so he was gonna fight.
Well, it was. That's a major offense. If you had, I mean, if you had gone to his home and you had admired something, it's yours. It has to be. If you admire that thing sitting on the shelf, he is morally obligated
To
to
give it
to
to you.
to you.
Oh,
Yes. That type of thing. You have to be very careful to honor their local customs and so
it's
forth,
kind of like the
which in
pen
so
on
many cases
Seinfeld.
are different than ours. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but
So
such delightful people, though.
yeah, they were really good people. I mean, it was a little bit too formal for me, I think, but I mean, I guess that was the culture. Like I really, towards the end, I was really terrified of saying anything out of place. Everything was, oh, it's very nice. It's very nice. It just,
I hear you. I absolutely agree. It is again such a different environment than we're used to. You don't want to do anything to offend anyone there, um, because you don't know what's going to happen as a result.
yeah.
You don't want someone to be fired or be punished in some way because of something that you didn't think, was of anything of any great significance. But they would, or they may. So,
Yeah. It's
yeah,
interesting. I'll share another story with you, Alan, that in Japan, like
please.
like we as Americans, we're really keen on sort of saying things as it is. And so like in America, if you're just doing okay and you just say, "Ah, I'm all right," that's perfectly normal. But in Japan, like it's very important to say, like, I'm doing very well. Like that's the baseline. If you're just normal, then the response is Genki. Like you have to be really, I'm doing very well. So like as an American, if I'm just tired sometimes, so if I'm talking Japanese and they ask you, how are you? And I just reply with the American attitude, oh, I'm all right. They're like, oh my
Mhm.
God, what's wrong? And so
Yeah.
they end up being freaked out.
Well, I'm sure that there are so many things like that where you're either very used to them or you've had to learn them over time because of the differences there in Japan. I mean,
Yeah.
I've never had the pleasure of visiting there, but in speaking with those that have, they've shared with me so many of those differences, those cultural norms and so forth. But I had not heard that one, but I can certainly see that as being, part and parcel.
Yeah, the American blasé attitude just doesn't come across. Like everything has to be really, really toned up to be really happy, and so that's the
Uh,
baseline. So
yeah.
it's sometimes really tiring for me to put up that act, but I mean, I guess as you said, that's the customs here, so you have to abide by them.
Yeah, well, again, just and that was so much part of what I enjoyed is being exposed to and learning all those differences. But as I said, the people were the same everywhere, but those uniquenesses were things that I always found very enjoyable and very enlightening. Even though I screwed up as many as I got right, it was, always just a great learning experience for me and something that I found just to be a lot of fun.
It sounds like a really, really great experience, especially that Australia story. That must have been awesome
It
to be there.
it was, and again, just so many situations, and you've got as many stories as I do with all the different travels and the things that you've been doing since then. So be interesting to you find yourself in the States, or I find myself there overseas to be able to sit down and just compare a few.
Yeah, I still have family in Ohio and I still have family in DC. So the next time I get back, Alan, let's definitely hook up and we'll try to meet up somewhere in the Philly area and try to get a beer. It'd be awesome.
I would look forward to it
So, all right.
very much.
Well, thank you very much, sir, for your time. It was awesome to reminisce with you, and I wish you well on your trip to San Diego and on your retirement. I hope you have a good ride still.
It's been my pleasure, John. I really appreciate you reaching out and providing the opportunity just to look back and reminisce a bit. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you, sir.